Most people think that they're overwhelmed because they have too much going on, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is that they haven't been taught how to think that the world in a world that's constantly changing. Now, if you don't learn that, you don't just feel stuck, you fall behind. Today, we're diving into something that affects us in every single way, and it affects every single person. Whether you're building a business, navigating your career, or just trying to keep up with life, I'm joined today with Ted Santos, CEO of Turnaround Investment Partners and the creator of Disruptive Leadership Model, a framework designed to help people navigate uncertainty, disruption, and rapid change. He's also the author of a powerful book that breaks down how leaders and individuals can think differently to create breakthroughs, not just survive change, but actually grow from it. Ted, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
No, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation. As you and I have already discussed, we are from neighboring towns.
Yes.
Our schools were football rivalries, so
Mhm.
we've got a great background of that's in common, and I look forward to this conversation. So thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Now, so many people right now are feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling stressed and uncertain. Why do you think that is really going on?
I'd say one reason it's going on is we keep telling people that they're stressed, overwhelmed, and can't handle what's going on. It's almost like an ad campaign for anxiety. How do you get people to be more stressed? You keep telling them they are stressed. And sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, it happens. One of the things that I would say gets in the way of people is our relationship to problems. And so I'm going to say something counterintuitive that seems almost backwards. One of the biggest problems people have is they don't have problems.
Yep, that's so true. I feel like a lot of people are in denial and they really need to open their eyes and take a step out of the box for a second because sometimes when you're in the box or you're outside the box, sometimes you have to go in between the walls so you can see both sides of the story.
Right, right. And so let me sort of expand what I'm saying. So if you're the CEO and you are not intentionally creating problems for your organization, you should be fired or retrained immediately. Major part of a leader's job is to intentionally create problems. And we have lots of examples. You say when John F. Kennedy said we'll send a man to the moon before the end of the decade, that was a huge problem for the whole nation to
Yes.
come, to come together and solve it, and we solved it. We can go even further back and say the founding fathers said we're declaring independence from Great Britain. That was such a huge problem that they put their lives on the line to make that problem turn into a reality. So we can there, Henry Ford. There are lots of them. Even Steve Jobs is a great one. Elon Musk, and I guess people will have thoughts about Trump, but we have lots of disruptors in our world throughout history. So intentionally creating problems, people may think, well, no, you're just reframing and you mean challenges. And I mean, no, really, in your life, don't be afraid to intentionally create problems. There was a guy by the name of Roger Bannister back in the 1956. He's from Great Britain, and during his time, they said the mile cannot be run in under 4 minutes. It's humanly impossible. For
Yeah.
Roger Bannister to take on and say, I'm going to break the 4-minute mile, no one knew how to do it. So, how do you do something that's considered humanly impossible? And because everyone's saying it's impossible, people run 4 minutes or 4:01, and that's world class. Do you have
Yes.
any idea how fast the world record, what the world record is right now? Do you have any idea?
I have no clue. No.
It's 3 minutes and 43 seconds. That's a long way from 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Bannister created this problem for himself that I'm going to break the 4-minute mile. That means I have to train in a way that I've never trained. Maybe it affects my diet, my sleep patterns, and all of things come together. And he runs a 3:59, and that was unbelievable. And a few weeks after he ran a 3:59, a couple of other guys did it also. Um, I think it was last year, a 15-year-old from New Zealand ran under 4. He ran under 4 minutes. So that's no one that young has run that fast. So creating problems, not challenges, creating, committing to something, not like a pipe dream, committing to something for which you don't really know how to do, except you will commit to doing it. And if you look at it as kind of like a defeatist, "Oh, I could never do that. I'm not made for that." Some people say, "I could never be a leader," and they give you a long list of why they couldn't be a leader. But if you did commit to being a leader, even if you're being a leader in your own life, the CEO of your own life, what are the things that you do to develop yourself into a leader? Effective communication, knowing how to delegate, being able to create leadership in other people. These are all great things that if you were to commit to, you'd be creating yourself into a leader. You don't have to lead a Fortune 500 company. Being able to make decisions and understanding the big picture, not necessarily always being in the weeds. There are lots of things that you can do to develop yourself into a leader as opposed to saying, I'm not built for that. You just haven't trained for it. Just like
Right.
during Roger Bannister's time, no one trained to run a mile in under 4 minutes.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. Now, why do people handle chaos well and others shut down?
So I would sum it up with two words: self mastery. So the punchline, and this is why I say stress and anxiety is it's promoted to people. Chaos is really not chaos. It's something occurring. Something happened, and your interpretation of what happened is what makes it chaotic. People often, what I call, they make up stories. They write a whole novel in their head about something that happened. So, on the most elementary level, let's say a 2-year-old wants to tie their shoes, and that's chaotic. They don't do a good job tying their shoes. So they think they're a failure. I don't know how to do this. Maybe they cry. And
Mhm.
then when they're 10, tying their shoe is not a big deal. But if they were a 10-year-old who couldn't tie their shoes, we might say, what's going on with your child? They can't tie their shoes. And if you're 20 and you're having temper tantrums about tying your shoe, there are lots of questions. So as a 2-year-old, it seems impossible. But as a 5-year-old, maybe now you can tie your shoes. 6, 7, for sure, you're tying your shoes.
Right.
So just because you can't do it today doesn't mean it's impossible. It's like, what are the structures that you put in place to train? But there's also a mindset that's important. And I can give you an example of a client. So I had a client, this gentleman was in his early 60s, and by profession, he was a CPA. He worked for one of the largest CPA firms in the world. And then he decided he wanted to change professions and he went into the mortgage industry. And he was doing okay. And then he hit a slump and no matter what he did, he couldn't climb out of it. So when he hired me, one of the things that we discovered is that he would get what he called heavy hitters, investors. He'd get them to the table, they'd have a meeting, and they would be happy to have a conversation with him, but he could never close the deal.
Right.
He'd make a good friend, but they wouldn't do business with him. So what we discovered is, see, here's a guy who's 62 years old, and we had to go all the way back to when he was 13.
Right.
And when he was 13, he was in Brooklyn. Forget about it. He's in Brooklyn and he's in the back seat of a car with guys who are like 17, 18, and he's a 13-year-old hanging out with the big guys.
Yeah.
Someone said, "Why is this little kid in the car with us?" And he
Mhm.
cracked a joke. He made a funny comment. Everyone laughed, and they put their arm around him and said, "Oh, you're cool. You can hang out with us." So what that did for him is whenever he felt like he didn't belong, he became the funny guy. That became his superpower, but he
Right.
didn't know what to do beyond that. So when he is in a meeting with heavy hitters, he's the icebreaker. He makes a joke and everyone laughs. Oh, this guy is cool. And now they're ready to do business. And he cracks another joke. Then he talks a little business and he cracks another joke and another joke. Everyone's, laughing out their seat. They're having fun with him, but they're not doing business. What happened at 13 is he had this whole story about how he didn't belong, and the only way he survived getting kicked out of the car was to make a joke. So that's the way this is a guy who survives. As a CPA, he didn't really have to worry about that. He worked for a large organization. Client comes, he does their taxes or whatever, whatever he's going to do, financial services. But now as a mortgage broker, he has to sell, he has to create a different kind of relationship.
Right.
And he didn't know how to really belong in that, and his story as a 13-year-old of not belonging, his only way to survive that was to make jokes, and that actually ended up sabotaging. So, we often have these stories in our head, and the way we overcome them is to do something that often works against us, or it works to a point, and then there's a diminishing return, and it ends up sabotaging us, and that we do that even in our intimate relationships, in our
Yeah.
marriages. So so that's a way that people can presuppose stress, anxiety, I don't belong. Like you already know something's not going to be right. I'm not cut out to be a leader. That situation is going to be so problematic. I'm going to have so much anxiety. So you've already started the anxiety wheels turning. And then as
Mhm.
soon as something goes wrong, the whole story about, oh, I knew it, and it becomes more and more stressful. So when I say self mastery, it's being able to master and manage the self-talk that derails you so that now you have a choice. So the guy in the mortgage industry, he didn't have a choice in his mind. There was only one way to deal with not belonging, and it was to crack jokes. And then he talked his way out of a deal. So once he was able to see, I'm getting ready to crack a joke and another joke, and it's okay to do it initially as an icebreaker. Everyone's comfortable, but now I'm ready to do it again. And that's not the reason for this meeting. The reason for this meeting is to provide a service to someone. So to do that, I need to understand what their needs are. So we worked on sales strategies and the kinds of questions you will ask so that instead of him cracking jokes, he starts asking questions. He uncovers what they want to accomplish, and then he's was able to close deals. And how that worked in real money, when I met him, let's say when I met him in the first 3 months, he doubled his productivity. So when I met him, let's say he was doing 2 units every month. Now he's doing 4. And so in 3 months, he doubled it, and then in the next 3 months, he doubled that. So now he was doing 8.
I love that. Is the workload is it w is it the workload or is it how people are thinking about change?
So, yes. So, take that story, and so something changes, geopolitical, competitors, economic, pandemics. People have stories about what's happening and how it's going to affect them. They can presuppose, "Oh my god, this is gonna be so awful. It's gonna be too much." And then if you keep hearing in the media, people are having anxiety, "This is too much." It's like it feeds into presuppositions that people have, and so it just self-perpetuates, and people now say, "I knew it. See, I'm stressed out. I knew it. I knew this was gonna be too much." With self-mastery, you can catch those beliefs, those limiting beliefs, and
Mhm.
stop them. It's not about controlling them, it's catching them and then saying, "Okay, what is it I really want to accomplish here?" And what you'll find, instead of trying to have this peaceful life, you find that you can operate in the face of chaos and
Mhm.
catch the limiting beliefs. And that's where you'll find peace because now you're focused on what you are committed to, and if you start training to be good at it, what
Mhm.
you find is when you're good at something, you don't care about the chaos, you don't care about the difficulty, you're enjoying the accomplishment and the progress that you make. So it's like you said, it's the way you think, it's the way you look at the situation. If you look at it presupposing it's going to be stressful,
Right.
as opposed to this is a way to express my prowess. I'm really good at this. I've trained for it. I'm best in the world. And that's a very different way to look at yourself in the world
100%. Now, most people resist change. Why is that such a dangerous mindset today?
because you'll end up being derailed and you'll get that what they call the self-fulfilling prophecy. And
Mm.
it's once it seems like I can't navigate this change. It's like I failed, and you kind of want to just opt out. I don't want to do this anymore
Yeah, that's so true. Now, why do people get wrong? What do they get wrong about waiting until things calm down?
because they never calm down.
It's really true.
I
That's really true.
mean, we can look at history. We can say we've had the most changes in history, but I don't know, go back 130 years and we're in 1895. And how many people had electricity in their homes? How many people owned an automobile? You were riding a horse. There was no such thing as an airplane. So
Mhm.
imagine seeing all of those things happen in a short time period. That was a lot of change to go from having candles in your house to or kerosene jars to having a artificial sun in your home that you can turn on and off whenever you want. And now there's an automobile thanks to Henry Ford. He made it affordable to most people. And then the
Right,
Wright brothers were flying. So that was a lot to see happen, and so how do you navigate that? So they were navigating the changes during that time just as we are navigating the changes during our time. So the change just doesn't let up.
right. Now, what happens if someone doesn't adapt fast enough?
You can be left behind. I mean, everyone's talking about AI and how we may be left behind. So
Yeah.
um, you can resist it and you can still have candles in your house today instead of
Right.
electricity.
Very true. Very true. Now, I just want to make a quick moment. If you're listening to this and you're getting value, make sure that you follow the show right now because every episode we bring you real strategies, real conversations, and real tools to help you think differently, grow, and move forward, no matter what you're doing and going through. Now, back to what we were saying, you created something called the Disruptive Leadership Model. Now, break that down in a simple way. What does that actually mean?
Sure. It goes back to what I said. CEO's job is to intentionally create problems, intentionally create disruption, chaos, uncertainty. From a technical perspective, it's something called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is, in our brains, we have these neural pathways and they look like roadways in your brain. And that's where all your knowledge and information, experiences, all of that is carried and transmitted through those pathways.
Right.
And you have the pathways in your brain that you have. If you're an English speaker and I just all of a sudden say "Очень приятно познакомиться," which is pleased to meet you in Russian, you won't
Yeah.
understand it because there's nothing in your neural pathways to understand it. But if you were to learn Russian, you'd grow new neural pathways that would now possess the knowledge of speaking Russian. So it's the same for anything. If you want to develop a new skill, you most likely don't have neural pathways to support it, and you'll have to grow new ones and it doesn't happen in 1 hour. So,
Right.
Malcolm Gladwell talked about 10,000 hours of practice to master something. So
Mhm.
so disruptive leadership is really about that. It's about disrupting your people. So if you only speak English and you learn Russian, you've disrupted your brain and you'll have to grow new neural pathways.
Mhm.
Disruptive leadership is the capacity to disrupt your people to drive innovation, penetrate untapped markets, find new revenue streams, but also to be able to upskill your people so that as the company grows, you can delegate more to the individual, your people grow with the organization, and as the company grows, the CEO and everyone else is better able to handle a larger revenue milestone. So if you're going from 10 million to 20 million, 20 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to, and so forth, it takes a different mindset to grow each level. So that in itself can be disruptive. So if you intentionally disrupt, you are training your people to navigate more effectively in uncertainty, and they are growing. They're developing new skills, new competencies. You're driving innovation, and that just creates a more nimble organization so that when the economy changes, you're nimble enough to be able to navigate. The pandemic happens, war happens. All of these things happen, and your organization is better able to think through as opposed to saying, "Oh my god, a new change, we're being disrupted. This is terrible. What are we going to do?" And you kind of sit there helplessly waiting
Yeah.
for someone to give you the answer, and you kind of just going with the flow. You now can become a market leader.
Right. Now, what's one mindset shift that someone could actually make today that would change how they approach these challenges?
One way to do that is to look at events that happened to you when you were very young that shaped you. So in another story, I had a woman who one day she asked me, "Ted, why do I always have to be right?" So if you find yourself like you have to be right and you fight like an alley cat to be right, and I said to her, "You probably gave the wrong answer one day." And she said, so we're, sitting there having a calm conversation. But when I said you probably gave the wrong answer when you were about 5. And she said,
Mm.
"Oh my God, yes." Now she was animated. "Yes, when I was 5 years old, I was in the dentist's office and I'm sitting in the waiting area with my mom, and there were other children with their mom. And the
Mhm.
dentist opens the door and comes out and says, 'Hi, children, who knows what this is?'" And she
Right.
said, "Oh, I know, I know." And she said what she thought it was. And he said, "No." And she said, in that moment, all she could think was how stupid and embarrassing she was, and she would never let that happen to her again. That was at 5. Now I'm talking to this woman at 45, and she still is carrying that 5-year-old whenever she feels she might give the wrong answer. She's not going to let herself be stupid, embarrassing, and look really bad, so she fights to be right. Do you have any idea what her profession was, what she grew up to be? You wanna
No.
take a guess what her profession was?
What was it? Don't tell me dentistry.
No, she became an attorney, a criminal lawyer who fights to be right.
Wow. That's so funny. Makes sense. It makes sense.
So her 5-year-old was still making decisions in her throughout her entire life. So one of the things people can look at if you're engaged in certain behavior that either has a limit, like a diminishing return, or it sabotages you, go back and look, where did I start that? Because you haven't always been that way. There was an
Right.
event that happened, and once you can see what happened, now you have a choice to be that way or to not be, or to be something else. So then what you can do is then create, well, who is it I really want to be? Do I want to be the great problem solver, or do I always want to be the devil's advocate that proves everyone that's wrong? You're just more trying to be right. So a advocate can play a role provided when they say, well, let me be devil's advocate. And they try to give you this impossible scenario.
Yeah.
Now think about how to make that work. You can use that mindset to your advantage to empower everyone around you, as opposed to sucking the energy out of the room and trying to prove everything is impossible. So that's a way to do that all on your own, so that
Mhm.
you're not like this automatic machine, sort of the stimulus response. So for that woman, the attorney, whenever she felt like she was going to be wrong, she's in fight mode,
Mm.
which in a courtroom fighting for a client, that works. But when you're
Yeah.
leading an organization or you're in a marriage, that actually works against you.
Right. So you wrote about this in your book as well. What made
Yes.
you feel about this message was so important to you that you had to put it in your book?
Well, so my book is about intimate relationships.
Mhm.
And I've been a businessman even from childhood. People would actually see me as a child walking down the street and say, "You're gonna be a businessman one day. I can see it." So I've always had that mindset, but I've also been concerned about relationships.
Yeah.
And now I see the connection between the 2. You may have heard me talk about this somewhere, but I'm gonna ask you a question. Corporate America is losing 300 billion with a B, $300 billion in workplace productivity every year. Do you know why?
I think people are getting burnt out and leaving, and also I think the CEOs are not paying attention to what the rest of the company really needs, and because of that, they're
Okay.
making inappropriate decisions.
That's interesting. That last part you said about the CEO not seeing it, and I'll tell you why. That there's some validity there. But $300 billion in workplace productivity is lost every year because of one word:
What is it?
divorce.
Very
So
interesting.
yes, there was an organization, Life Innovation, did they pulled out the CPAs and engineers, and they did all these calculations, and they found that 300 billion is being lost. Another company found that when a person is going through divorce, their workplace performance drops by 50 to 75%. They are distracted. So
Yes.
that doesn't have to be just for divorce. Imagine an intimate relationship that's gone on for a year to plus. If there's a ugly breakup, they will be distracted also. What I found is that divorce is impacting our society more than we can imagine. So if corporate America is losing 300 billion, that could affect profits. I have a percentage of my employees who are not very efficient in the workplace, and I don't know they are distracted. I'm the CEO. And the reason a CEO wouldn't know that is because your people in the upper classes, they don't have this, they have a significantly lower divorce rate. So they wouldn't see the amount of divorce that's happening below them. The people
Mhm.
around them are married and they stay married. The people further down are getting divorces and they are less effective in the workplace.
Right.
So you wouldn't even know it. So what do? You start laying people off. And when you lay off, when Google lays off 10,000 people, GM now has to lay off people because they just lost, car buyers. And when GM lays off people, then the home builders have to lay off people, and then the washer and dryer, and it puts the whole economy in a downward spiral. So just from divorce, the entire economy gets impacted negatively. And it's not even talking about how divorce now impacts the mindset of people and how they feel about relationships and commitment. There's another 30 billion that goes direct to the taxpayer because a divorce usually creates poverty and social programs, and people going young people going to prison, and all kinds of other problems come out of that that goes directly to the taxpayer. So divorce, bad relationships are affecting our business world, and we're pretending it's not happening, and
Right.
no one's talking about it. No one's doing anything about it. So just think about the conversation we've had so far. If you're
Right.
making up stories about how awful things are, how awful my spouse is, I can't believe they do this. If we make all these stories, if they say this to me, I'm going to die. I'm going to have all this anxiety. And so you presuppose all these things that go wrong, which then puts you in opposition. I mean, technically, you're in conflict with yourself, and you
Right.
now are projecting that conflict onto the other person, and you
Mhm.
end up breaking up. And, what I find is many times there are misunderstandings. So we don't know what questions to ask. We're not always the best communicators. And that misunderstanding, it builds up. There's a second misunderstanding and a third and a fourth, and now you have this snowball effect,
Yeah.
and it crashes, it crushes the relationship. But it was really just a misunderstanding that could have been addressed, and maybe it was something as simple as the way my family did it was the right way. The way your family did it was I have no words for it. It's crazy. I can't believe anyone would ever do that.
Yeah.
And so now we're fighting about that, and the whole marriage falls apart.
Right. Now, who is this book really for?
Technically, the way the book is written, it's written like a workshop.
Mhm.
So the book is for the individual, but I like to think of it as an existential corporate handbook because I use some business situations, and one is, imagine you look at your spouse as your number one client. And if you
Mhm.
have a client, how do you engage your number one client? You take care of them, you take them to lunch, uh, you make sure you understand their needs, their upcoming, how are things going to be in the future? How are you going to be impacted by this so that you can accommodate them and maybe even provide brand new services. And you
Right.
do that, you keep clear communication. And if one day there's a mistake and your client blows up and gets angry, you don't
Mhm.
just fire your client, you work it through. You talk
Right.
through the difficulty and you find out, okay, okay, we made an error, or maybe we both made an error. So now we're going to, I'm going to be 100% responsible for our end. and I'm going to rectify it.
Right.
And that way you keep providing the service to your client and they keep paying you. If you treated your spouse that way, you'd have a great marriage. And it's not that it's business, even though marriage is a legal binding contract. It is a
Right.
contractual agree. It's a
Mhm.
business agreement. It's a business arrangement, like, whether you want to
Right.
believe it or not. And if you don't, you'll find out in the courtroom in divorce court that, this
Yeah.
was a business arrangement.
Right.
So so if you learn to engage your spouse the way you would engage your number one client, your spouse will continue paying and they'll continue desiring the services that you provide. So
Right.
if your organization can learn to address, you have internal clients, you have external clients. So how do you engage one another? The book addresses conflict resolution. And I would say that may be one of the number one things that you want in an organization, because there will be conflict between, when you're, even when you're innovating, there are ideas
Yeah.
that come together. And instead of them conflicting, they may be able to come together and make something that neither of you could have done on your own. So the book is designed to take the reader on a journey of transformation so that you have a better inventory of yourself and
Mhm.
who's compatible with you and how to engage. So it's more effective with communication, is being able to be more open, more direct in your communication so that people around you can understand your needs and you can understand their needs.
I like that. Now let's talk about pressure. When everything feels uncertain, how do you make good decisions?
I want to say this without sounding too abstract or airy fairy. So a word a word is almost never just a word. When you look up the word pressure, you're going to see entire sentences or paragraphs about what the word means. So we make pressure mean something, and we
Mhm.
make it mean something that's difficult and hard to overcome. And that
Right.
goes back to what I was saying about our relationship with problems.
Mhm.
If you give yourself problems intentionally, when the pressure comes, you have a greater muscle for being able to manage the pressure that comes, and you can see things for what's actually occurring as opposed to all the presuppositions that comes with what pressure means. So
Right.
this goes back to self-mastery. I can give you an example from my own personal life and
I
how
would love
I
that. Mhm.
so when I was 21, I went off to when I was living in Washington, D.C., I went off, graduate high school, you go to college. And a
Mhm.
few years later, both my parents are dead, and I'm the oldest of four. My
Wow.
brother was 19 and my sisters were 16 and 12. So you have two sides of a family. This is pressure. Your parents die unexpectedly. And so now I leave DC, I come back to New Jersey, and there's a lot to deal with. And I'm dealing with things that this is the whole situation is filled with uncertainty. I have to deal with things I've never dealt with. That's all uncertainty. I have family members, mother side, father side, there are fights and arguments. There's where this is filled with chaos. So I was committed to the emotional well-being of my siblings. That was my number one priority. Nothing was more important than that.
Yeah.
So I made sure I did all the things, now I'm back home, it's the four of us living in the house, and I wanted my sisters to live with my father's sisters, so they're together and they're okay. And my brother, I take him off college in another state. But I still need help. So I would ask my sisters to do things that they
Mhm.
didn't know how to do. I knew they didn't know how to do it, and
Yeah.
I knew there was a high chance they would fail at it. So
Yeah.
I was giving them a intentional problem. I gave
Mhm.
them a problem, and they'd go out and they'd fail at it, and they come back, and I would never give them the answer. What I was there to guide them. So I'm delegating something. For me, it was really simple, but for them,
Yeah.
they'd never done it. And so they go fail, and they come back, and instead of telling them what to do, I became Socrates. I would ask questions, and
Right.
they would take those questions and go back and fail again and come back. And they'd come back and then they'd finally accomplish it. And you could see, their face would light up like, I did it. And they knew they did it on their own. I didn't tell them what to do. And I kept doing that, and that allowed me to give them more and more complex things. And so we go back to neuroplasticity. They were growing completely new neural pathways to solve problems. And after a while, I would just be able to ask them to do something and they wouldn't even fail. They would go, they wouldn't even come back to me. So I don't
Right.
even know if they failed. They had a new way of looking at the problem. So it
Mhm.
was no longer pressure. So I solved the pressure by giving them pressure, by putting them in
Right.
situations and uncertainty and being there as a guide instead of, I'm going to teach you how to do it. You're going to teach yourself how to do it. I'm just there as a guide to help you think through it. So this is a way that people can do with themselves. They can do if you're a leader in an organization, it's a way to do with your children. And you understand that they may miss the mark on their first couple of tries. If you become frustrated and say, you just have to do everything yourself, you robbed them of the ability to learn something new and develop themselves. And so it's a way to coach people up. And in that way, giving them things that are over their head, they now have a very different relationship with pressure, and so do you. So you can do that with yourself.
I love that. Now, how do you stay grounded when everything feels unstable?
I never think about being grounded.
Mhm.
That's really just not part of my language. So there's 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 what I'm committed to, and maybe I didn't get it. Maybe I missed the mark, right?
Right.
So what's missing? So you can beat yourself up and say, "Oh, I knew it. I knew it." I always get it wrong. It's like, okay, I missed the mark. So what's if there's a gap? What's missing in that gap, and what are the steps? What are the things that I need to do to fulfill what's missing in the gap? So I can
Right.
close it. So if I'm at 1 and I
Mhm.
want to get to 10 and I only make it to 6, I'm 4 away. So what are the 4 things that I'm away? So there's nothing wrong with wanting to go for 10 when you're
Right.
already at 1, provided it's not a pipe dream. Like there's a commitment to accomplish it. So
Right.
it's really not about, for me, it's more about commitment. And commitment, that goes across your entire life. Your intimate relationships, are you committed or are you just a player feeling your way around? You're just having fun, but are you committed here? For
Right.
your profession, even with a hobby, um, and maybe a hobby is a safe way for people to kind of practice commitment. I don't care if it's collecting stamps. Learn everything that you can about stamps and what makes one stamp more valuable than another, and
Right.
commit to that and really understand that ecosystem. And
Mhm.
then you can transfer that kind of mindset to other things.
Right. I love that. Now, some people actually grow during uncertain times. Like, what are they doing differently than others?
Good question. What are people doing differently in times of uncertainty? They may have had the advantage of parents who kind of, you could say trusted them and asked them to do things that were
Right.
over their heads. And sort of it's the same thing that I laid out that I did with my sisters, so that they'll have a greater capacity for navigating uncertainty because they had practice when they were younger. And some people, this is why so many businesses like athletes, because athletes they understand discipline, they understand practice, they understand putting these structures in place to go
Mhm.
to progress in whatever it is. You start out as an athlete and you're not good at it. You can look at football and you look at the little Pop Warner. You don't put a little Pop Warner in the NFL, so he has to develop, whether it's a quarterback or blocking a lineman or a running back. These are all things that you develop over time and you watch your development. So you can do that for a sport, you can do it for a hobby. There are lots of things. So people who appear to know what to do in the face of uncertainty, they've probably had some practice, and as opposed to being derailed by the uncertainty, they are looking at what is it we want to accomplish and what's possible. So we can go right, we can go left, and think it through. You may not have all the answers, but you're
Mhm.
looking at what's actually in front of us.
Right.
Aside from chaos, what's really in front of us?
Yeah. That's a really good answer. How can someone turn a difficult situation into an opportunity?
Counterintuitive. Stop looking for the opportunity in difficult situations. So,
Oh,
eh, that's kind of what I think that we're told. Every difficulty, everything bad has a silver lining. Maybe it does. Maybe it has a lesson. What I learned from my parents' death, I couldn't have told you at the time, but I was developing leadership and I was learning to lead in the face of chaos. So I was able to actually transfer all of that I learned into my professional life as an executive
mhm.
and being able to lead a company. So it's not always apparent. So in the situation with my parents' death, my commitment was the emotional well-being of my siblings. And I stayed true to that. I wasn't looking for the opportunity. I stayed true to I need to make sure they're okay. Okay, my parents have a home. That home is now a business. I'm going to rent it out. So there are things that I wanted to accomplish and I stayed true to that. And there were things that I had to do to get from point A to B to C. So stay true to your commitments and everything doesn't have to be an opportunity. And sometimes the opportunity is you developing yourself in a way that you never have. And the only way you will get there is actually going through the chaos and to develop yourself. It's kind of like I go to the gym and I work out. You know, I do bench press, I do curls.
Yeah,
I'm going to break my muscles down and they rebuild a little bit stronger each time that I train them. Or
right.
I have to go through the breaking down of the muscle to get them to be stronger and have more endurance so that I
Right.
can do the other things that I want to do in life, do the training. And sometimes life is just the training ground. That's the biggest training ground in the universe, right?
Oh, it's very true. Now, if someone was listening and they feel stuck right now, what's the first step that they should take to move forward?
Find a it's good to have a network of support. So if you have someone, sometimes just talking it through, you look from another perspective. Allow other people to ask you questions. You know, I serve as an executive coach to a lot of executives. So I'm a not just a sounding board, but in some ways I am. They get to talk to me about things and I'm going to ask them questions that they have never asked themselves. So
Right.
good first step is finding someone who is supportive of you and wants to see you win and
Yeah,
you can engage them and they allow them to ask you questions and if they say something you don't like instead of being upset and saying how could you say that about me, understand what they are saying because they may have a better view of yourself or a more objective view of yourself than you do of yourself.
that's so true. Now, where can people find your book?
Sure, it's everywhere. It's on Amazon, of course, at Barnes& and Noble online and in the bookstore. Yeah, or wherever you find online books, you will be able to find the book.
I love it. Now, also, you were mentioning early on that you have a book that's going to be launched in the near
Yes,
future. Can you tell us about that book?
sure. So I have 2 partners, and we created an app, and the app is called Career Fit, and Career Fit is really an acronym. It stands for competence, accountability, relationships, engagement. It's just an Career Fit is an acronym, and we
Yeah.
look at those are 9 letters, and those are pillars for creating a very successful career. So we created an app that serves as a GPS and a GPA. So from a GPA perspective, the app allows a person to do self-assessment. It's going to ask you questions that you generally don't ask yourself. So this would be a great first step if you feel stuck is to go to our Career Fit app and and it's going to ask you questions, it's going to rate you, and it's going to give you a score. And then it's going to tell you, here's where you're strong, here's where you're not. And then it's a GPS because it's going to provide guidance. There's an AI component, and it's going to make suggestions on how to get stronger in the weak areas and close the gaps. And what we also did is we wrote a book to accompany the app. And the
Mhm.
book, sort of like my book, it's dynamic in that it has characters and you get to see real world activity through the book. You get to see how people engage for mergers and acquisitions, how you engage your mentor, how to deal with conflict resolution, what happens when something fails, what happens when the really high performer runs off the rails and does crazy things, and and how do you become more self-reflective. And it also talks about how to use the app in the book, so it refers back to the app. But the stories, the scenarios in the book really provide great guidance on how to better navigate the day-to-day occurrences in the business world, and gives a very different perspective. So there are a couple of mentors, and we have two main characters who engage their mentors. They engage other people in their companies. They work for two different companies, but they went to college together. So you get to see how people create relationships in the business world, and how people really come together and collaborate and acknowledge one another. And so it's both the app and the book are extremely useful for people who are looking to move their career to the next level, or if you just want to be the master of I want to be a project manager or salesperson for the rest of my life, and I want to master that universe. It
Mhm.
really provides great guidance for that. So you don't have to just be the person who wants to be in the C-suite.
Right. Now, where can people find that app?
Well, the app, if you, I can give you a link. I have to check with my
I'll put
partner.
that in my
So,
show notes,
yeah,
actually.
careerfit.com. You should be able to go to careerfit.com and it will take you to the app.
Mhm.
Generally, I've given people the link. So this is what we're talking about. This is something that's hot off the press.
Yeah.
We are seeking a publisher for the book, and we've done some beta test. We've already beta tested the app, so we've gotten great feedback from people who said they're continuing to use it. So if people were to reach out to me, you can type in careerfit.com and it should take you to the app. But if not, I can provide a link and it'll take you. It's actually a web-based app. So you don't have to download it from an app store. It's a web-based.
Oh, I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Now, your book, your actual book that's gonna be launched soon, that's probably coming out, you said in November and around that time?
Probably. I didn't say that, but that I'm assuming that's
Oh, okay.
probably by the time you go through all the edits and set up marketing and launch date and all that, that's probably where we will come out, probably around there. That's
That
a great assumption on your part, but that shows that you have experience in the industries.
uh-huh. Well, I do actually. I just assumed by calculation from what you were
Abs
telling me early on before we did the show.
Yeah, on the money, on the money.
Now, can you tell me a little about that book that you're gonna be launching in the near future?
Well, that's the one I was just talking about, Career Fit. So that's the book
Okay,
where it
that's the
provides
name.
guidance. Yeah, the name of the app is Career Fit. So the book will be about the app. That's what the book is written. It's written about the app.
Excellent, excellent. I like that. Now, you also had mentioned early on that you provide consultation services and so forth, that they could actually go on your website to access that.
Absolutely. So if I were in an elevator and kind of putting it lightly, my elevator pitch would be I'm in the business of producing miracles.
Mhm.
CEOs, they hire me when they are looking to create a breakthrough and they are not sure how to do it with existing resources. So I work with them to create disruptive strategies that turn into either disruptive technology and or allow them to penetrate untapped markets. And then I work with them to transform corporate culture to ensure the culture doesn't sabotage that breakthrough initiative. So the simplest way to say that would be an executive coach, but I often do significantly more. I've been an executive myself, so I'm not theoretical. I've been in the field. I've run organizations with hundreds of people in it, and so I understand it from boots on the ground. But
Yeah.
I also have thousands of hours in training from an advisory perspective. So, I didn't just put a shingle out. I have an enormous amount of training in transforming corporate culture and developing leaders to their next level of success. So, if someone would like to sort of get their feet wet and understand who I am, what I'd like to offer your listeners, if you contact me either through LinkedIn or through my website, I will offer you 30 minutes free of my time, and we'll see if we can uh I want to say create a problem for you to solve.
Love it. I love it. If people could walk away from this episode, what are some important factors that you'd like them to remember from what we talked about today?
Sure. Chaos is not chaos. It's something that's occurring. Your interpretation of what's occurring is what makes it chaotic. Being able to take a step back and distinguish the conversations that you're having with yourself, your thoughts, they may or may not be limiting beliefs, but just hear them and then look at what's occurring and then get clear about what is it I want? What is it I'm committed to accomplishing here? Because that's your power.
Yeah,
If you interpret it as something awful that I want to get away from, that's where you lose your power. You're giving your
right.
power to something you call chaos. And it's really not chaos, it's just something occurring. So he who masters chaos masters self.
I love that. I love that so much. And for the listeners, I want you to remember that the world isn't slowing down and that the truth is that it's not about avoiding change. It's about learning how to think differently inside it. Because the people who grow aren't the ones who, with the best certain circumstances, they're the ones who learn how to adapt. So if this episode has resonated with you, make sure to follow and share with someone who needs to hear it. Ted, I love that you came on and you talked about disruption because so many people, when they are going through a period of their time where certain circumstances are disrupted, they immediately get stuck and
Right,
they just don't know how to move forward. They stop and they fall apart emotionally. Where I like your theory on how to kind of move forward and really grasp the positivity from that moment where you are disrupted, learn from it and become
right.
more resilient. And I feel that you hit it on the button because that's how you get through life. You become stronger, you become more wiser, you are able to learn how to handle situations. So when similar situations or other situations occur, you're able to handle them better and
Exactly.
you're able to really move forward and really reach your full potential and get to a higher level in life because you've had moments in your life where your life has been disrupted, but yet you don't let it stop you. You just get up, you keep going, and you just learn from the experience that you've been faced with in life.
Absolutely. Well said. I love that. If you would have said that from the beginning, there would have been no reason to interview me.
Well, Ted, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope you'll come back and we could talk more about this because this is something that I think is so important in a world where we're faced with so many obstacles. People have to really learn how to, rise above the chaos, overcome their obstacles, and move forward, because, you could make your dreams a reality just by learning how to overcome disruption in your life. And really
Absolutely.
came on the show today. And, you really shed light on a lot of different areas that are so important that people recognize. And I thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge and talking about your book and the app. And I'm looking forward to seeing your new book. And this has been a wonderful experience.
No, thanks for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. And you have a great day.
You do the same. Thanks a lot. Take care.